Good. All right, guys, we're live. Thank you for coming back. This time on Musetta Stone, we read Karen's pick, which is this book right here, How Music Got Free. And there's actually, I think there's two books with exactly the same title, but like they have different subtitles. I think. So I actually bought both of them by accident. I bought the first one. I was like, this is the wrong one. So I have another book to read. But yeah, so this is outside of our normal kind of picks of of fiction. This is a nonfiction book, but I think this is kind of relevant for at least the three of us because we grew up in this world where it kind of started and everything. And I used almost all of the applications and software that were like asked that were like kind of like yeah. So I thought that was really cool. But anyways, before we do that, Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm right.
Your puppy is sick. We talked about this.
He's been sleeping for about 40 minutes. So see what happens.
Yeah. Have you because this is like your second and final week of spring break?
My second week, plus I have 3 days. I don't go back till Wednesday next week.
Right. Is it because of like Good Friday? And
yeah, because Easter backs on. So instead of Good Friday, we get it on the Tuesday.
Right. Have you started your lesson plans yet? Well, have you like started like prepping for coming back?
Oh, have I prepped? Yes. Yeah. Have I submitted them? Don't need to, but yes.
No, because
the principal kind of just lets me do. He's like, I trust you to do what you're gonna do because you've been doing it for a while. I'm like, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I was because Christy's on the island right now as well, and I was chatting with her. She's like, oh yeah, I haven't started my prep yet. We'll see. I was like, oh, okay.
Technically, term 3 started like 2 weeks before spring break started.
I don't know about these things, so I'm not in the school system. So, but I'm glad you're okay, and hopefully the dog gets better. Keep us posted. Karen, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm also on spring break. Woo! It's been a pretty stressful last 2 months because we had the concert sort of unexpectedly scheduled before spring break, which was also the same time as report card. So
I've been there.
To the
I've been there.
So I'm fully recovered now, I think. I've regained most of my intellect.
No, we were. I played for Karen actually for those concerts. They were really fun, and actually, I enjoyed the way that you guys kind of scheduled them. Like the first one for the kids and the other two for parents. I mean, that's a lot of time, though. Obviously.
Yeah. So it was 3 afternoons. The first concert was for the whole school, so they could see what each other was doing. It's sort of a dry run through concert-esque dress rehearsal thing. And then the next 2 afternoons were for parents. So
yeah, it was pretty fun. And I mean, those days were beautiful. That week was all beautiful. And then spring break came and it's all gross out.
Yep.
But I think my favorite song actually was I think the Filipino one.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it was just so cheery and cheerful, and the kids really loved doing all the actions and stuff. It was really cute.
Yeah, Bahay Kubo. All it is, like, it says it's a song about the hut, and I'm like, yeah, but then in the hut, it's like, okay, here's the hut, and then there's the garden. Check out these beans and these beans and these beans, and then there's radish and mustard and carrots and ginger. I'm like, really, it's a song about the garden. It's not a song about the hut.
But it was fun, and the kids were amazing. They were, I think, the most well-behaved kids I've worked with in a while.
Oh, really?
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't think so for the school concert.
No, I think it's because it's like, oh, look, all the friends that they get to chat with for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, but like on Wednesday and Thursday when the parents were there, they were quite well-behaved.
Oh, yeah, because the parents were there.
Yeah. But I mean, I've been in Montessori schools where these kids just talk over like the announcer and stuff. Yeah. So like, and even in GNS once in a while, like the principal will come out and be like, hey, stop. And then they won't, like, it's just because it's that electric energy you get when you're with your peers and you just want to chat and talk about things, even though you had a whole lunch break to talk.
I'll give them a little bit of slack.
Yeah. Yeah. Flack and slack. Both of those work.
Yeah.
Well, see, unfortunately, I don't get spring break. In fact, spring break means that I get to catch up on lessons, and also I have 4 piano students doing their April exams, so they're doubling up their lessons and adding extra time. And then I have one, two. So I have 2 Harmony 10 students doing their May exam and 4 History 9 students doing their May exam as well. So it's just been a lot of just like reviewing and stuff, and a lot of just like I'll show up to work and I'll be like, oh, this person hasn't shown up. And I'm like, hey, where are you? They're like, oh, we're in Calgary. Can we reschedule? I was like, well,
no.
I'm already at work. So
that's not how this works.
Yeah, so a lot of spring break is just like, oh, I'll show up to work because at least I need to be at work. But
yeah,
it might be a coin toss as if my first student will show up, or my last student, or my second, or my third, or my fourth. But it'll be fine. Like I realized that I was like, you know what? That's okay. Most of these parents pay me at the beginning of the month, so they're not getting back. But yeah, a lot of it is just like a lot of kids. I didn't realize because when we were growing up, I didn't go to like spring break camp.
Yeah, neither did I.
But like now there's a lot of camps everywhere. So all these kids are like, oh, we can't actually do 3:30 anymore because they're in camp till 4. I was like, oh, you're in camp?
Yeah.
But
it's like an alternative for a daycare.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah.
And I mean,
at the restaurant.
But like I grew up having a parent at home, so I took that for granted, right? Because like I just stayed at home all the time.
Well, and I had both parents who were teachers, so of course we had the time off.
Yeah. I did lunches at the restaurant because I was suddenly available for lunch shifts.
Well, no. Amanda didn't work at the restaurant. She just helped.
I helped.
No underage working here.
When I was a kid, they would take me to the kitchen. They're like, "Here's a 50-pound bag of carrots. Peel them," and that's what I would. So my hands would turn all orange. And then when I turned like 13, they're like, "Okay, you wash dishes now." And I'm like, wow.
See, this is why I can't do like family restaurants things. I understand why a lot of my friends don't want to pick up the business because like of that traumatic experience growing up.
It's not traumatic. It's just
it just changes who you are,
It does.
It just defines you as a person.
That changes, it builds character.
Actually, you know what? They said they never wanted me to take over a restaurant. They're like, we work so much. Like they work, Dad was at the restaurant like 8 a.m. to like midnight. Yeah. And he would come home, sleep, and do it all over again next day. And he's like, you should get a job where you actually could have a family.
Yeah. So, which is sort of music teaching.
Which is not, I don't think Mike would agree with that.
Yeah, but hey, you know what? Like, we'll see. Right now we have a government that's very pro-education.
Yeah, I know,
so
right?
We'll kind of see how that pans out in the next couple of years and whether or not some of the promises that they've like said will actually take fruit. It would be really nice to have more like EAs and more help in the school.
Yes.
Right? Even smaller school sizes and better composition would be amazing for these kids, right? And for you guys.
Right now, there's just a lack of people. There's a lack of teachers and there's a lack of EAs. And that's just because for so long we worked with less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now the people who we did have all gone because it wasn't worth it or they weren't getting work. So now they're gone.
But now we're trying to bring them all back. And one of the big things is there are a lot of, at least from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of new specialty teachers coming out because now there's actual positions available.
Yes.
So like even my teacher librarian group, there's such a new crop of them, and it almost like doubled our size because there's actual jobs now for the specialty. So it's interesting
to get into teaching.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, hey, you know what? Like Christy's here, like, and her husband and her are moving to the island. So
they're moving to the island. What happened to that place in Surrey?
Well, I mean, they lived at their. We're not going to talk about this for too long. But she lived in her parents' place, Titan's parents' place, and Titan here. He already has a job. Like, there's so much construction work available right now, and he's a foreman. He knows he has all this experience. So, like, they're just snatching him up. Now it's just her trying to figure out what she can get here. And I think there's a lot of TOC things right now. So it's just like, I think just start again. I mean, it sucks, but this is what happens when you move to.
Victoria's a nice place to be.
Yeah. I mean, like they were saying, like I said, let's go to the book soon. But they were saying how it's just everything is so much more affordable here. Like groceries, groceries is expensive, but they want to buy, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, wow, we can afford almost all the houses here.
Which is
There are
weird
houses
because
available?
I look at the houses and I go, oh, I'll never.
Oh, no. Oh my God. I did a quick search and the condo prices in the downtown core have gone up by 100 grand from the last year.
How much are condos now?
Condos like 500 to 600.
500 to 600 downtown Victoria now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
ridiculous.
houses are in the millions.
Yeah, they're in the 800s to millions.
Or like they're 990.
Yeah.
Like you kind of go, yeah, okay.
That's where Mike and I live now. Everything here is like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4.
Yeah.
And our townhouse has gone up, I want to say like 100 grand since we've been in here. And we've been in here under a decade, 6 years, something like that.
Yeah. But it just, Victoria is just a great place for family if you want to raise them. Like the people are nice. And
yeah. Mike will never move back, I don't think.
Look, we read a book.
Sorry, we read a book. Mine has no desk cover. I'm really kind of irritated that it came.
I had to return mine to the library. So.
Oh no!
So, my one came and it got like damaged.
Aww.
So I was like, oh, but it's okay. It's fine. Whatever.
Okay.
It's just my OCD.
Book are still the same.
Yes, it's just my OCD. That's all. Do any of you guys who wants to start first? Who wants to go first?
I'll
Let's say Karen because it was her pick.
Okay.
I was a little bit worried about this one because this is very, very unusual for our music book club, where most of our music content has been instrument and classical Western kind of based.
Yeah.
And this is all about the digitizing of musical records. So I was like, okay, this is music, but it's a little bit more tech and consumer side, which is important. I was a little bit worried that because it was nonfiction, it was going to be very dull. I found that I had low expectations for it, and it far exceeded my expectations. So I quite enjoyed it. Well, it wasn't my favorite book. I really enjoyed reading it, and I learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you want to go next?
Okay. I had mixed feelings about this. There were parts of this that I really, really enjoyed, and there's some parts where I'm like, oh, and that might just be because I don't necessarily have that technological brain. So when they're explaining things, I'm like, I mostly understand this, and then I had to look up a couple of things.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh, now I get it. But overall, it is what Karen said. It's really interesting, and we were talking about this before because we grew up right when all this stuff happened. You're like, oh, I get that. Oh, I use that. Oh, I did that. So yeah, it was very interesting in very, very many ways. And overall, I would say I enjoyed it. Aside from the certain parts where I'm like, I just need to skip over this next 2 pages and I'm good.
All right, I'll go next. I also I quite enjoyed this book. I had the same reservations as Karen. I was like, oh, this might be like someone's thesis paper. It's really boring. And I think it's because I had those connections to this type of technology.
Yeah.
I used every single piece of software they brought up. I even used like BitTorrent. I like perused Pirate Bay and never used Pirate Bay. But that was interesting to me. I think the only thing for me that kind of took away from it was like he would name like an agency or a company, and then he would start using abbreviations, and after a while be like, what does RIAA stand for again? And then and I was like, oh, I had to look it back. But other than that, for me, it was just because like I grew up, like I used all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like for me, I didn't have to look up as much because I was like, okay, I get what this is talking about. It was just really interesting for me to be like, okay, I use all this stuff, and now I have the history of how those things came to be. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting.
Because we probably grew up during our like early teens into our 20s during this time. Yeah. We didn't have full understanding of exactly what was going on. Had we been in our 20s to 30s, we would have had a bit more of a maybe understanding, but not really. We experienced it very much like you think about kids these days that just don't understand the technology and the context for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they take for granted kind of like this. I mean, it's exponential, but at one point it was very small. At one point it was like this, one MP3 on an MP3 player to 2 to 4 to 8 exponential growth, right?
Yeah.
So because I remember when I got I got a CD player and I was like, this is the best thing, and then I got an MP3 CD player and I was like, oh my god, boom, and it's like, oh, I could have like 18 songs on this now, not just like 10. So like for me, that was like huge. And then just like, and then just realizing that, I didn't know how big of an impact the MP3 had on the music industry though. That's
or
like,
how much of a struggle it was to get out there, because to just read about like, oh, I don't like it. We always went back. And then they brought out the AAC. And I remember being on iTunes when it started and having to convert all my stuff to AAC before I could put it onto an, I remember that. I'm like, oh, this is so like a part of my life.
No, but the thing, like, I mean, okay, let's jump right into this because
we already have.
So Karl Heinz is Brandenburg, right? Yeah. So he's the guy that kind of is the father of the MP3. He creates this format, which at the time was superior to the format that everyone was using. But because Philips, a big like company, a corporation, was backing the MP2, they pretty much just politics away all of the support for the MP3, and they actually tried to sabotage it and make it even harder for people to take up. And the result was that these researchers was like, we're just gonna give this out for free because God knows no one's gonna use it. And that's kind of the backdrop to what happens with everything else. So yeah, like what Amanda said, it was really interesting because it just felt like it just took so long for this technology to like take root, but once it did, it just exploded.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that as soon as it was sort of unleashed onto the sort of the public, but like the people who actually had an interest in technology and exploring that and actually doing stuff with it, that the collective ended up expanding, and then it grew into something because there were so many people who had a real passion into it.
Yeah.
I really liked that idea, but just to get it going was so frustrating.
Yeah.
Like,
and that it was technically this underground movement of MP3 and Pirate Bay and all this stuff, that thinking, oh, that happened when I was, like you said, listening to my CD player, and all the stuff was happening underground that you didn't know. And then all of a sudden, the what's it called came out, when the iPod came on, you're like, oh, MP3s, these are so great. Why didn't we ever think of this before? Well, I don't know, it's been like 2 decades that we've been trying to move this along, and finally it picked up.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna say, and it's crazy that, like, reading this book, realizing the MP3 is actually that old.
Yeah, actually, right?
I just thought it was just like, oh, this is a new thing, but it's like actually predated when I started using it by 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. The MP3 is almost 30 years old.
Yeah, that's usually how tech ends up working, though, is that just to find a use for the greater public.
Yeah.
To convince the public that it's an okay thing. That's kind of how it is. I really was intrigued by the phrase that by the time the MP3 was being built, whatever, CDs were already old tech.
Yeah.
And I think back to, like 95, and I'm like, oh man, I was only just getting into CDs.
Right? Actually.
So it's fascinating to hear that it's already passé when we were living in the time where it was like, oh my goodness, CDs are amazing. That's why it felt like CDs were there and then they weren't. They just sort of were gone because MP3s were gone.
I mean, I don't know if you guys know. I don't know like how many of you guys actually like spend a lot of time downloading MP3s on like Napster, Kazaa, or LimeWire.
Oh, I did a lot, and I'm sorry, I will fully admit to Napster.
But my thing is, I just realized that the shift from downloading MP3s for free when I was younger, now where I purchase it on iTunes, was so streamless that I don't even remember when I switched to using iTunes.
I do.
I don't remember it, like, for me. Yeah. But do you remember it?
I remember because it was in around the time I got my first iPod, because I remember using a lot of Napster, and I remember using Napster just to get the songs, and then downloading like 14 versions to find like the best one to put on to burn onto a CD, and then eventually getting that iPod, and then being like, oh, I don't know how to rip this onto this. I guess I have to get iTunes now, because you have to have iTunes to run your iPod. And then in and around that time, I'm like, oh, iTunes. I wonder what iTunes is. And then that's when it started.
Yeah.
And then for a long time, it was ripping CDs onto iTunes to put onto my iPod. And then it was, and then it was pretty seamless into purchasing stuff off iTunes. Like now I just browse and buy CD.
Yeah. No, same here. Now I just buy it whenever. Like it's interesting. I think you're right. I think it was when I first got my first iPod that I go, okay, there's too many hurdles for me to get free music onto this stupid thing. I'm just gonna buy that one song, and buy that one song.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something that they brought up too was this whole like the world that Doug Morris grew up in, where it was just like the album was the thing, right?
Yes.
Where all of a sudden now for me, I was like, I mean, I buy albums simply because I'm a completionist, but I don't listen to most of the tracks because most of those tracks are filler tracks. It's just those 3 hits, and then the rest of them are like, right? But then now, like there are certain bands who are going back to the whole full feature album, like Moonshaped Pool by Radiohead was amazing. The entire album, but you have to listen to it from the beginning to end. Like it just, you sit there, you just be, all right, I have an hour and a half. I'm just gonna sit here with my coffee and just gonna like enjoy. But most albums that I have, I don't have that experience because most of them just they weren't built that way. It was really interesting for them to kind of even mention it because I thought I was like, am I the only one thinking this way, that these albums are not really worth buying, but I just get them because I just want all 10 tracks.
Yeah. I used to think that was really weird when I was little, and I would listen to these CDs and I'd be like, why is it always and I noticed a pattern. It was certain numbers of certain tracks were always the trash tracks that I would just never listen to them because they were absolute garbage. And you would just go, how did this make this on here? Oh, it's just filler. It was, we need to make something out of this. We have the music video things.
Yeah.
We have the radio ones. And then that's it. Like, we don't need anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, speaking about that, like the whole idea about music videos, because I mean, I watched, I didn't have cable, but I watched a little bit of MTV and the music videos and stuff. But I didn't know that those videos were just promotional. There was no money involved.
Yes.
No one was getting paid. I was like, that's really interesting. That whole world was just created just to sell CDs.
Yeah.
And then Doug Morris, smartass, was like, we're gonna start this thing called Vivo.
Yeah.
Did not know who started Vivo.
Right? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
And
I did not know who started Vivo. And I watch Vivo a lot now.
yeah. And the thing is, like, to go from he's just like, no, we spent millions of dollars on these music videos that people are just doing for free. No. And I remember going through that when YouTube went through that huge copyright thing, where all these videos got taken down because they were using copyrighted material. And then, like, all of a sudden, I was like, this book connected me back to where I am now.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
The music video thing was interesting because when they're like, oh, it's just promotional material, I'm like, wait, but they spend so much money on these videos. And I think of the ones I've seen, I'm sorry, and I legitimately thought of this one first. It was a Backstreet Boys song because Backstreet Boys.
Was it Larger Than Life?
Yes, it was. It actually was. And I remember thinking, I'm like, they had used so many graphics in that. And that was like, when they released that song, that was a top tier music video because it had all that computer graphics, it had green screens, and all that kind of stuff. People were flying about. And I'm like, they spent that much money on promotional material to just let people watch wherever. And you're like, how do they get, and my second thought was like, how did they get that money back? Because that was an expensive music.
They were making the money on the CDs and the tours.
Mm-hmm.
So what's
I guess that's true.
now is that they don't make money on the albums at all. They make money on the
tours.
And
yeah.
a little bit of the music video, but mostly it's tours.
Yeah, which is a weird shift into everything because before it used to be like you sell your CDs, you play these kind of small little things, then you play the big ones, but there's not very many. There's not a huge tour as they are now.
What was really interesting, I felt maybe a little bit duped for the 2000s. It explains why the 2000s have such, I mean, pardon my French, shitty music. Like there isn't a lot of good. Like you look back and
it's true.
If these decades were better, these decades were better. It's because it was all about the money and trying to get ahead of the MP3 thing. So he was just like churning out all these different acts, whether or not they were good or not. It was just a show.
Yeah, because like he was just like, there was one comparison that he had, which is like either this iconic rock star or some nobody pop star. Well, the nobody pop star, I was like, oh, okay, I totally agree. Yeah. Like I had that like existential moment too. I was like, oh, that's why you did this. You did this.
Less about the art and more about the money, which was just, to me, it was a fascinating, just like, I mean, I guess it was always about the money, but you think about the artist.
Also,
I don't know. It feels a little soulless.
Yeah,
it is. But that was the shift into like when that entire thing with finding like Dr. Dre and Jay-Z and Tupac and signing them all into this incredible like gangster rap that was this huge genre and whatnot. And then going from that to basic, like you said, like basically nothing. Because now that you say it, I'm like, that's right. I didn't like anything that came out in like the early thousands.
Yeah.
And I think the last big groups were those big pop groups, like the Britney Spears of the 99s and like the boy bands and all that stuff. Those
they
were
didn't have substance. It was just sort of like bubblegum pop.
It was bubblegum pop, yeah. It was for a quick buck. I think there's very few that even survived after that because it was, oh, they're a fad and now they're gone.
Yeah. But I mean, like the result of that, the 2000s was that a lot of indie groups started popping up, right? Just to fill the void. Like, I mean, the 2000s, I mean, yeah, I'm not a big fan of pop music generally, but Marina and the Diamonds are amazing. I love Marina and the Diamonds. Like, and they're always a small label. Like, they were always small. They were never really that big. But because of this lack of substance, like her Electra Heart album is amazing. But because it wasn't like she was fighting against, and I'm not belittling her music. I'm just saying that there was a void there. And there's these indie groups that started to, jump in. And that's why now these big labels are eating up all these indie groups.
Yeah.
Because they realize that these indie groups have something, right?
But now we're starting to get more, I feel like we're starting to get more music that might last a lot longer. Like you look at the music that does last. You look at the stuff from like the 50s and 60s that we still listen to and we're like, this is just classically good music. And then the smattering in like the 80s and 90s. And now we have kind of nothing that there's not much that I would say would actually last through, while we're around.
Well, you think about what Bruno Mars usually does is that he will release a song in the style of whatever, and it ends up
he's bringing
on those nostalgia strings, or it's just like, oh, you like this song because it reminds you of this time.
Well, he's bringing funk back.
Oh my god, I love funk.
I told my kids the other day, we were listening to it, and I'm like, do you realize that they sample things? So when you listen to this beat, especially some of the stuff by Bruno Mars, there's this thing called funk music, and it existed before Bruno Mars. He did not make this style. He sampled this style. And we started talking about that kind of stuff. And they thought it was really interesting because they're all born in, oh my God, like
2000.
Yeah, like 2007.
Yeah.
Like those are my 11-year-old kids. They're 2000s, like freaky.
Yeah.
And they did not exist when all this stuff happened.
So. But the book leads up until, what is it, 2015 or 14?
2013.
So so it's come pretty close to where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's speaking about like different types of music, like Amanda brought this up, like Dr. Dre and that whole movement of rap and how Doug Morris decided, hey, that's a good thing. I was at L Furniture Warehouse with a friend and Philip like a couple of days ago, and the DJ in the restaurant was just playing all of this like Little Bow Wow, like Drake and all that stuff, and I was like, just all African, like just like pretty good. Some of it was pretty good, and I forgot Little Bow Wow, but that's because he went bankrupt. Like I forgot TLC, but that's because they went bankrupt. Like we forget that, like especially in this world, right? They jumped onto rap because it was something that was polarizing and people really loved. At the same time, they also took advantage of all of these musicians. None of these musicians have any rights to their music, right? And I was like, oh, that's crazy because I'm watching Little Bow Wow and his music video and listening to his music, but this, I mean, he's probably a man now. He will not get a cent. Because a lot, like, especially like with these labels, right? They took advantage of these people, and and only certain people like Jay-Z, for example, buying his own label back, right? Like, we talked about this. They did a coin flip. I thought that was really cool, right? But he bought his own label back, and now he's a producer, right? But like, it was just interesting because it was just like it was also part of that world. I mean, like, I was brought up not allowed to listen to that stuff, right? But it was just cool because it doesn't, like, I mean, like, obviously he doesn't take the author doesn't take a stand whether or not it's good or bad. He just states it as like, this is what happened.
Yeah,
right?
no, I found he was pretty biased in a couple things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He was like, woo, rap music, and then it was like, oh, pop music, whatever, right? he had some biases that they were in there, and I was like, tell me how you real feel.
Yeah.
I was kind of a little bit flabbergasted. I never got into rap, and I've never been into rap, but I didn't realize how big of a role it played in the whole MP3. That was the stuff that people were wanting. That was the stuff that was pirated first and released first and in such high demand. Like, I didn't realize that it had that big of an impact and a role.
It was so new, and the subjects that they talked about were things that you would never talk about before that. So it was this huge, brash, like, raw kind of sound, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is so great!" And then everything kind of took off from there. But it was interesting that it was such a huge thing. You never thought of it because we grew up with, like, we knew who Dr. Dre was and Jay-Z and Tupac and Snoop Dogg. I knew who they all were. I've listened to smatterings of their stuff, but like Karen said, I wasn't really into it.
Yeah.
And then knowing that they're like, this is where that huge movement started was when that big record company were like, we want to sign those guys.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that was, I guess, rap was the new music of the 90s. Right? That was the one thing. And I mean, I never got it. I'm into it now, but I never really got into it then. Yeah. Right? Because I was just like, no, like, this stuff is a little bit too much, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
To give you kind of an interesting glimpse into what people a decade from us listen to. So the games night crew that I joined a couple years back, they're all approaching 40. So they're all about 10 years older than what I'm at. And they will bring up a whole bunch of rap stuff. Like, they'll play a song and they'll be like, oh, I remember this one. They were all in university studying software engineering and all of that. So they were in the midst of it. So it makes sense all of a sudden to me why they listened to all of this rap, because they were probably peer-to-peer sharing.
Yeah, and they were in college.
Check out this, and check out this, and like all on the technology and talking about it, that it makes sense to their narrative. Whereas, like, they'll play it for me and I'm like, I've never heard this before. And they're like, you've never heard Gin and Juice? And I'm like, okay, no, I haven't.
No, you know what? You've made a really good point. Like, we were too young. Like, we had parents who would never let us listen to that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I remember I had a friend in high school who bought me the Sum 41 CD. And I had to throw it out because my parents thought it was too vile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you know what?
I can throw it out. Just, like, return it.
I know, right? It was expensive. CDs were expensive back then.
They were like $20, and you think, oh, $20, I can buy one CD. And I remember, but you know what? I also grew up on, my parents did not listen to radio very often. I grew up with like Elvis. I grew up with Elvis, and I'm not kidding. Elvis, Tom Jones, the Carpenters.
I thought that conversation was going to go somewhere else. Like, my parents didn't listen to radio. I grew up in silence.
That's what I grew up with.
So I rebelled and played the saxophone and piano.
Right, exactly. I think the most modern thing my dad really listened to was like Shania Twain.
Oh yeah.
Oh, because she was hot.
Only because she was hot.
Yeah.
And the very first CD I remember I got was Mariah Carey. Was the very first CD I got was Mariah Carey's her breakout CD with all the big hits. I remember the cover. It's just her in like a black leotard on a black background. And I remember listening to that CD, I'm pretty sure until it was just done. Because it was the only CD I had. But it was interesting because when he's talking about these old school people, that are just collectors. And we see it now when we talk about like hipsters and when they collect vinyl.
Yeah.
But I was that kid all the way through my 20s. Yeah, pretty much all the way through my 20s. I collected CDs. I had a crap ton of CDs. I still do. And the funny thing is I don't listen to them anymore because I have it all my music is on my hard drive, my separate hard drive. And to know that I have all of that music now compiled into that one hard drive. Oh, click a button. Oh, there's that song from 1994 that I really, really liked. So it was interesting when he brought up the idea of the collectors, the music purists that would collect these things.
Yeah. But only the best recordings of it. And I liked that because, it was this type of an album, but then they would also take it from the LP and then they would take it from the set. So you have all of these choices of audio to listen to. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, the idea of the collector.
Yeah.
The collector, I was a collector.
But that was really cool because most of these people who were doing it, they weren't doing it because they were doing it because they were like, sticking it to the man. A lot of them was just like, we want the most pure recording, the best audio experience you can get for this thing, and we want it to be categorized in a certain way and needs to be listed this way, and we want props for doing it first. Yeah. And that's all they wanted. It was just like a friendly competition, like between geeks who just really wanted. Like they just wanted to brag about how geek they were, right? How amazing they were, how they could leak these things. And I don't think I think a lot of them really realized what they were doing until they got like the law came down on them, right? Yeah. Because for them, there's like even the guy who started BitTorrents, right? He Ellis, right? He was just like, I'm not doing anything illegal. I just created this system so that people could share things, but share them in little packages so that it would download quicker. Yeah. And we just started this archive, and there's no music or movies on this website, right? I just created a technology that just allows people to peer-to-peer share things a lot more efficiently than what's happening right now.
It brings up really interesting questions on copyright laws. That was one of the things that I was thinking about too when I was reading this. Like, the thing about sharing and copyright laws and all that kind of stuff, and like kind of where is the line? Like the peer-to-peer sharing, no, I don't house anything on my thing, but we are sharing. And would that be any different than being like, hey, Poon, here's a book that I like. Or Karen, here's a game that I like. And to share that with you.
Or lend you a CD.
Right? Exactly, right?
Yeah, I think someone in this book mentioned, I don't remember who it was, but someone mentioned how copyright laws are archaic and they need to be changed. Like they don't apply to this world. Right now.
So long, and the problem is because it's so exponential, it needs to catch up, and by the time they get some sort of copyright, everything, because the law is so slow, it's already changed before they can let something out.
Yeah, like a good example, 2013, the year that I was in the BAM Center, that was the year the copyright on The Rite of Spring lapsed.
Oh.
And 2013, like, so he wrote it he wrote it and premiered it in 1913. So it's been 100 years. So since he's died, his family has taken the copyright, but his family has passed away. His brother or whatever has passed away as well. And because the next of kin do not want to take it over, it is now public. But before that, you were not allowed to arrange Rite of Spring. You were not allowed to do any rendition of it for fear of legal action.
Wow. Yeah.
100 years on that. So now that 2013 is done, you hear all these really awesome arrangements of it. But Stravinsky was very strict on not wanting his music to be tampered in any way, right? So there, like on the one hand, you're like, okay, I understand, like from a composer's perspective, that like this is music that he's created and he's created in a certain sound that he wants. But in another way, as a creative myself, who arranges all the time, I go, I should have the right to express myself through your music. I'm not taking away from your music, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to, like, let's say, for example, even doing arrangements, let's say I can't sell my arrangements because I don't own the copyright to the actual melody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm finally giving them away for free. I don't care. But that, like, a lot of people, like, look at Ray Charles, look at the Beatles, right? They copied a lot of people. They took other people's sound to find their own sound. It's the same with the way that we create music, right? We find our own voice in the way that we interpret things by pretending to be Chopin, pretending to be Mozart, pretending to be Beethoven until we find our own voice. And does copyright actually take away from that creativity and kind of put a stop to it because we're not allowed to share, right?
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's all about money when it comes down to it, right?
Always like using is we stand on the shoulders of giants. Which is we don't exist in a vacuum. We are standing on somebody else who thought of it, who's standing on somebody else who
thought of it first.
Standing on some it keeps crawling up and up and up and up and up, climbing over and standing on other people's shoulders. There's no vacuum. Everything just bleeds into everything.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thought because this was a project I gave to my kids. We looked at covers and explained to them, like, the people that you are hearing now, they're not the people that sang this first. They are people that have created a version of this song as for them, the artist, which is different than the original. And a kid actually asked me, they're like, well, what about copyright things? I'm like, that's an interesting question about copyrights, like, because you're basically taking the same melody, you're basically taking the same rhythm, you're basically taking everything that's the same, but you're changing it a little bit. And I actually couldn't really answer that kid. I'm like, what's interesting about copyrights? Because there's so many people out there that make a living doing covers. I mean, like half the people on YouTube do it.
I can speak as someone who's in the YouTube space right now. That what happens with copyright is, let's say if you have a video that it's an arrangement or a video where there's background music that has a copyright claim on it, they'll claim it. You can still post a video, but they'll take a certain amount. When it comes to people who are just starting on YouTube, it's all of it.
Yeah.
Every cent on that video is taken because they take a certain amount, and it's not like a percentage, it's like this lump sum. Every year, all the time. So it's gone. So that's why for me, for my arrangements, whenever I put arrangements up, I don't even put ads on.
Yeah.
This is free. Like, my arrangements are also, they're gonna be free soon. I'm trying to put up a website. But like, yeah, especially for people who are just starting, it's really difficult to do it on YouTube because if you want to make money off of this, then the arrangements might not be a good way to start off unless you're just mega talented.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, it's in the end, it's all about money, right? And
it was just interesting for a kid that was in grade like 5 to talk about, like, oh, what about copyright laws?
I mean, and that's why we have all of these like rules when it comes to, like, if you want to create something, you need to have a patent, right? Yeah. They have all these things. And so, like, even Karl Heinz, right? Like, he was like, I'm an educator and I don't really care about this whole, like, making money corporation until I started making millions of dollars. and then he starts actively killing projects. Yeah. Right? And you realize, actually, like, even the engineer himself, the mind, the brain behind it, it can get kind of quote unquote poisoned by just the act of money. Because he was like, what did he say? Like, he made like over $200 million on his patents and on his copyright stuff. Yeah. Right? It's crazy. That's a lot of money for a scholar.
Well, and it was interesting I mean, the author definitely pushed this narrative, whether or not it's true. It's the truth in the book, is that he starts out being like, oh, no, it wasn't me. It was the team.
Everybody.
It was the team. It was the team. It was the team. And then suddenly his demeanor changed and he's like, oh, no, it was me.
Yeah.
I got this.
Do you like my new suit?
Yeah. You're just like, okay.
Yeah. But it's true. It's that idea that money changes everything. And even that poor statement of everybody has its price. depending on how much it is. Everybody probably does have a price. Yeah, it was. You know what else I found was interesting in here was, since we're talking about copyright, that one statement in here that was like, videos and VHSs had that huge, like, if you copy this, you will go to jail.
FBI warnings.
Yeah, the warnings out of everything and every DVD that ever came out, and yet you have all these MP3s flying around everywhere, and they're trying to crack down on it, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, they mentioned it, that it was kind of like the war on drugs that they can't.
Yeah.
You just can't win.
The solution was Netflix.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah,
are paying to watch all those things in one place.
Yeah, like Spotify.
It's legal. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because Netflix has access and has probably paid all of the rights to have these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the same transition as the iTunes.
Yeah. No, you're right.
It's so true, because everything's so digital now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not completely ashamed to say this, but I legit have, for 1 or 2 days of spring break, just sat on the couch and I haven't moved. I'm just like, all right, Netflix, iTunes, TV, everything is just right there. And you're kind of like, wow, I should probably leave the house and go outside for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, but it is where technology is moving. You're right. It's like now, like, we went from this world where everything was just very hard to get. Everything was kind of like fractal. And now, like, everyone wants something where it's all together, but we can't get it. So we create a new business where they do all of the searching for us.
Yeah.
And now we have it, and all we have to do is pay a monthly subscription, right? Yeah. And that is the next level of entertainment, of music, right? I mean, like, I remember when Spotify came out, and I was like, I don't like it, because I like to own my music.
Yeah.
And after reading this book, I was like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy, because iTunes is now, like, during that time in the book, iTunes was the new technology. Mm-hmm. And now iTunes is no longer the new technology, right? Spotify and all those types of streaming services are new. And if you want to own music, by all means, there's iTunes, right? By all means, there's Google Play Store. But like, that's like, the thing is, like, and now kids don't care about owning music. They're just like, it's on Spotify.
Yeah.
I can stream it whenever I want to. I have, like, I have 10 gigabytes of data every month. Like, yeah, I can just stream it wherever I want to. And I grew up with, like, I only have 500 megabytes. YouTube, like, watching one YouTube video on my data means that I'm not using data for the rest of the month,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? But it's really cool, because, like, he's documented up until iTunes, and now he's talked about Vivo, he's talked about Spotify and all these things, and how they're taking off now. That's where it goes. And will the music industry continue to, like, do what they do and just kind of protect and protect and protect? Or will they try to innovate and try to create things and try to embrace it, right? Because I think the narrative is that no matter what, you can't stop. You can't stop what's happening, because technology and knowledge and science is just getting better and better and better and better. And even the average consumer might be smarter than you.
Yeah.
So in this book, I found that there were the 3 sort of characters. We've talked about Karl Heinz and we've
Morris.
talked about Morris. What did you think about the storyline with Glover?
It's interesting because, like, if you read the summary of this book, right, it paints a picture of this guy just like, oh, he's from nowhere, but he was the mastermind, right? Yeah. And then you read about him, you're like, oh, he's just like a normal person.
He's a normal dude.
He's just like fell into it.
Like, he's just like, he has a job, right? He has, like, kids. Yeah. He's trying to pay for all this stuff. He really wants a car, right? A nice car, because chicks dig nice cars, right? And you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then it starts out with these 2 friends who, like, work in the same place, and they've found this way to, like, smuggle CDs out in a way where no one can catch them.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the chubby, nerdy white guy goes away, and it's just
it's so true. It's interesting.
Sorry,
go ahead. Okay. It's true what you say, where you're like, you're reading and you're like, oh, he must have, like, consciously made that effort to do this. And in some ways he did, but in reality, you're reading this, you're like, oh, Glover just kind of fell into it.
Oh, yeah.
He just kind of like, oh, I'm going to give this a shot. oh, I'm in pretty deep now. And then when he's like, I didn't care. I had a duffel bag with 200 smuggled CDs in it in my closet.
Well, and the thing is, like, he was just in the right place
at the right
time, right? He just had
the right
access.
connections.
Yeah, he just became, was it a management position?
Yeah,
yeah.
Assistant sort of.
Yeah, but he had the power to oversee different shifts.
Yeah.
Figure out different things, right? So he was the right person for the job.
Yeah. He was also smart at thinking around the box and being like, oh, well, you put in all these security messages except my belt buckle. Which
I was going to say very clever with the belt buckle.
Yeah.
I liked the idea of this just everyday man having a huge impact because he's in the location of a CD manufacturer.
Yeah.
And then he sort of works his way up. I liked that idea.
And the fact that nobody will ever really know,
mm-hmm.
you know, like everybody knows Steve Jobs, and anybody who's in like the record business would probably know Brandenburg and Ellis and all that kind of stuff. But you're never gonna know Glover or is it pronounced Kaylee or Callie? Whatever. Like they'll never know about those guys who really kind of like shoved MP3 into the forefront. Because we can sit here.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Like was it Napster, that the guy who invented it,
mm-hmm.
Oh, he was like a bored university student,
wasn't actually the face of it. Didn't he have like somebody
he had an uncle
he sort of ended up taking sort of a back step, and so you have these people that are sort of underlying important people, but they're so underlying that people just forget their names.
Mm-hmm.
And forget where they came from. I liked that it shone a light on these people being like, oh, that's who did that? Okay.
Yeah.
Or how he prefaces with like, this kid who was bored at college invented Napster. And you're like, what?
Well, but here's the thing. Like, I mean, if you think Steve Jobs, he started Macintosh or Apple in his garage with a friend as a college board student.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of these like kind of like self-made men and women that we know from the 70s and 80s, they started off as bored college students.
Yeah.
Who realized, like they realized that their computer science class wasn't teaching them the right things.
Yeah.
We're going to learn how to do things our own, and that's how BitTorrent came. That's how like Kazaa, Napster, and all those things came, because they said like this college isn't teaching me what I need to know to be able to be a good computer scientist.
Yeah. They're teaching me what's good 5 years ago, but they're not teaching me what's good right now, currently, and the fad. You know, and it's the worry about something being a fad or a flop.
Yeah.
Right? Remember when people were like, oh, Twitter, it's just going to like pass through.
Mm-hmm.
And Instagram and all that stuff.
Now it's big, right? You can't really predict what is going to succeed and what is not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder how many people know about Steve Wozniak, because he was one of the first founders of Apple. But you see Steve Jobs, right?
More people know about him now because of, wasn't there a movie?
Yeah.
There's a book called I Was, and for some reason I have it in my library at school. I don't know why. And I end up taking it home and reading it and be like, oh my God, this is like ridiculous how Apple started before, almost actually kind of even before Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And Steve Wozniak sold off his chunk, and so he kind of like flitted off away, and then you have Steve Jobs that's left. Well, not so much anymore, but
yeah, I got the impression that the writer of this book did not like Steve Jobs.
Yeah, I got that too. He's
like to be fair, Steve Jobs was not a nice person. Right? He was not very kind. But the thing was, he had a certain level of expectations, and he had an aesthetic, and you were going to meet him here or you were not good enough. And that's how he created an empire, right? So like him or not, like this is how I talk to even some of my students. I was like, you know, like Angela Hewitt is not the nicest lady in the world. Martha Argerich is also not the nicest lady in the world, but they're amazing at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't like them as a person, you have to respect the fact that they are amazing people, amazing at what they do. And even if they're mean about saying something, there's a lot of there's a lot of education that you can learn. There's a lot of things that you can learn from them. So they don't have to always be nice. And I think that's something, especially as Canadians, that we take for granted, right? Is that nice people sometimes aren't the best people.
Yeah.
Right. So for Steve Jobs, yeah, obviously, I don't think Mr. Witt liked him at all, but I don't think most people in the tech world like Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
It just so happens that he died from cancer, and that I think kind of humanized him a little bit. But you have to remember, like, people, like, he never gave a cent to charity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, but
whereas you get someone like Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Who's just
but
like
have a foundation, right?
Yeah.
And they want to stop malaria and work on like education for women and girls and stuff, which
makes sense because he's got so much money and he's like, well, what do I need with all of this?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Make the world a better place. Right. Yeah. But yeah, I think the saddest part of the book was when they finally get caught. So this is RNS group, right? And it's headed by Callie, and it's run so well. Like, it eluded the Interpol and the FBI for 5 whole years. Yeah. Right? Like,
I liked this whole tension, the whole oh my goodness. It's
just like,
that was the good part. I'm like, are they getting caught? Oh, they escaped. Are they getting caught? Oh, they escaped.
Yeah. And
I like the juxtaposition of the record companies that's just like, we're just gonna go for the people who download and like bankrupt them because they have no tools. And then there's like the FBI that's like been in the whole like group for years and years and years and try to infiltrate it. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing was they would have never infiltrated it had they not stopped the group and then tried to restart it again.
Yeah.
Right. That was the only reason why, because one of them got caught, and the only reason why Glover got caught was because he messaged him, being like, "Hey, do you want to start this again?" Right? Because they couldn't stop. Right. And I was thinking, I was like reading through everything. I was like, guys, I hope the FBI hired Callie.
Right. I know.
They didn't though, right? Because like
no, they didn't. But
yeah. But I mean, like,
they had no proof that was Callie.
That guy was Callie. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
You have to, I mean, all of the arrows pointed towards them.
But how interesting would it be? Because this whole like crackdown on technological stuff and all these hackers and whatnot, it's like, well, you know what would be really interesting? What if you did implement? Because they're smart enough to get through everything that you have put up.
Mm-hmm.
So what if you turn it around and use that and be like, hey, can you come work for us? Like, you can put your stuff to good use.
Yeah.
Not that I know a lot about hacking, but I kind of went down a rabbit hole a couple of years back where I was watching hacking like documentaries and actual stuff from DEF CON, which is the hacker conference.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So there are different types of hackers too. So there's the people who hack just to like solve puzzles. They're not doing it maliciously. They're like creating their own puzzles and then they're like going through them. And then there's the black hat hackers. Those are the ones that are going maliciously through things and trying to be like, well, I could, so I did. And they're like, well, I'm going to throw out all of these bank information because you left a dumb flaw in your system, right? Like there's that. And then there's people that are just like, oh, we're just doing it because we love it.
Yeah.
Which is the majority.
Yeah. Because I think the idea is that like the whole conversation with the RNS group was that I think most of the people who were in the group just loved being on top, right? Being the best leaker group in the world. They were not thinking malicious thoughts about how they were ruining a business. They didn't think about those things because for them it was just like, oh, this is actually kind of fun, you know? We're kind of dodging the law.
It's a really interesting thing to think about because they're like, they want to be really high and well known, but most people have no idea.
Yeah. Well, and within their group, they didn't even know half of the other group existed.
Exactly. So it's famous with anonymity. Oh my God.
Anonymity?
Yeah, anonymity. Thank you.
Yeah, but I get it though, right? Like I think we all get it, like deep down inside, even if we're not recognized for something, the thrill of knowing that we're important.
Yeah.
Right.
What was the guy? was it the collector guy who lived a very stark lifestyle, like, and all of the money that he collected went towards the site.
That was Ellis, wasn't it?
I think that was Ellis.
Yeah. So like he had,
yeah, so he put all of his money into like 10 different accounts.
So he started collecting all the money from people who were giving generously, and he didn't spend a single cent on himself.
To me, I'm like, wow, that's honorable, and it just actually goes to show, it backs it up that he was doing it because he loved it.
Yeah.
Wasn't doing it to profit.
Yeah.
And they looked into that, right? They're like, well, you made all this money. He's like, I didn't spend. Like, yes, I have all these accounts because what if they freeze like 9 of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, even with his story, like he did mention in the book that at one point Ellis was like, this could be bad, but I've unencrypted everything. So therefore it's all freeware and I'm not hiding anything. So that's essentially what saved him, was the fact that he was just making it very public, like so public that anyone could find his email. Right? Yeah.
But that was the thing with him, is that the whole transparent business.
Yeah. As opposed to Pirate Bay, which is, I mean, it's literally called Pirate.
Well, and the founders were such dicks, right? So that's why they were saying, on the one hand, right, with Oink.
Yep.
Yeah. They were sympathetic to him because they're like, oh, he's just a guy who really loves what he does, and he just wasn't thinking. That's why he was not guilty. But with the Pirate Bay, no one cared about them because they were such assholes. Yeah. Right? That I mean, and that goes to show, you know, if you're a dick, you're a dick. And it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you believe in, you're a dick.
Yeah.
Right.
It's cool to have all those different personalities show through.
Yeah. I think for me, I just, because it's not a novel, I didn't get a chance to really like dive into like characters as much as I would appreciate it.
I could put this book down and then forget about it.
Yeah.
And pick it up again and be like, oh yeah, this is really good, and then put it down again.
Yeah.
I will say that one of the things that kind of frustrated me with this book, because it's spring break and I'm only using my head, is when the chapters jump between Brandenburg and Glover. And I remember one morning picking it up and be like, I don't remember what happened the last time I was with Brandenburg, and have to go back to like 2 chapters ago and be like, oh, okay, now I can.
Well, he starts off like a really major character in the very beginning, and then he peters out, and then he has like one little small thing at the end. Because like because it goes Karl-Heinz, and then Glover, and then Morris.
Yeah. But then it goes like Glover, Morris, Morris. And then, that was kind of almost the only thing. But I also there's so much name dropping that I'm like, I don't remember this guy. Like you were talking about with the acronyms, like you'll mention him in the beginning and he brings them back. I'm like, I don't remember who this was.
Yeah. But I think that's the nature of this type of book, right?
Yeah, I think so.
If it was a novel, names would only be dropped because they would be used again, or they were so important or so succinct to that one instance that you remember it, right?
Yeah.
For
With
this
type
book,
of book, it's real people, real world, and who's important at that time. Versus, like a fantasy book with a million different characters. If they're popping up for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like if you think about it,
here they're not.
Yeah, like for example, Karl-Heinz had a team of 6, including him. Yeah. And then he hired someone. I don't remember any of their names.
No, I don't either.
Right?
I actually kind of forgot about that. What's it called? Oh, that company starts with an F. And it was right in the beginning that the company that like they went to.
Fraunhofer.
Fraunhofer. And I'm like, I know this is probably important, but I keep
I took notes.
So many notes. Look, and I wrote in green ink.
No, I wrote some stuff too, and then like halfway through the book, I was like, you know what? I don't think we're going to talk about half of this stuff. Whatever.
Actually, you know what? I kind of stopped taking copious amounts of notes, and then I was just taking sort of like
blurb notes.
Arching, like Winston Palace and Napster and Hillary Rosen and Sean Parker and Private Cupcap, like just.
Yeah. I don't know. It was, for this book, it was just endlessly fascinating. I think it was just nice to, like I said before, have the history behind all of the things that I used and be like, I have a bigger and better appreciation of kind of like the amount of struggle that people had to go through to get this type of technology into our hands, and we take it for granted.
Yeah.
Right? And now that it's shaped the backbone of our audio experience online, and it's so old that no one uses it anymore. I didn't even know that until I was like, wait, we don't use MP3s anymore? I looked through, I was like, oh, we don't use them anymore. Because, well, no, we don't, because at the end of it, they were saying how everything's switching to this kind of open sourced audio file, which infringes on the MP3 patents. And Brandenburg was going to take them to court, but he's just like, it's freeware. We've made our money.
Yeah.
Stop.
So as a sort of out of the box music book, it was okay.
It was okay.
I was like, just like even last time's pick, I was pleasantly surprised at how interesting it was.
Yeah. But you know what? I feel like with this kind of book and reading about this kind of stuff, it made me wonder what's happening now underground that we don't actually know about. Because right now we're at MP3s, we're at MP4s. What's happening right now?
Where's the new tech?
What's going on? That they're trying to squash down right now that we're going to get in like 5 or 6 years. Is there something else that's going to be coming up? So I mean, that's always interesting. And the thing is, Mike is always he throws out these things every once in a while about technology. I'm like, I wonder if he's on that new thing now because none of us know about it. I've never heard about it before. So it's kind of, yeah, maybe he'll be the next one. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and something that Brandenburg wanted to do when he first created MP3. Oh, we have a double echo, don't we? He wanted to stream music through the phone, and it took till 2010 for us to finally have streaming music. Like he was ahead of his time.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's cool.
Was he ahead of his time, or he was the reason why in these 20 years we have this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it, because even think about the technology that we have that's inspired by sci-fi.
Yeah.
When you think about the composers that were doing all that weird technology shit music in like the 50s and the 60s, when like cutting tapes and sampling and mixing and it took about 20 years to get to the mainstream, and then suddenly the tech was like, oh, look, it's auto-tune, and it was like, well, okay, yeah, but that's been around for
a long time. Yeah. All right, but I'm glad we actually liked it more, because Amanda, you were saying how you were like kind of on the fence about it.
I still kind of do have some mixed feelings about it. Like it's one of those books that I would look at and I would read the blurb and be like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but I don't know if I would have made it through if it weren't for the book club.
See, and that's why we have this book club.
So I was worried that you both were going to hate this. I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna hate it.
No, I mean,
didn't hate it.
I think if the book was written in like an essay or thesis format, I would have hated it. But the fact that it's in chronological order, that was good.
I'm told very specifically, like, here are these characters that we're going to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If this was written like a thesis, it would have been very, very hard to read.
Very dry.
And if it went way down the road of explaining technology, like,
But I mean, obviously, like, he wrote this in the mindset of, hey, people who know MP3s will understand this, and it's not scholars.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not writing this for education. He's writing it because there is now a mass amount of people, consumers, who grew up with this technology, who understands this technology, who actually even dabbled in this world, and they would appreciate this because, like, and I'm telling a story, and it really was like, it was a story, and that's why it was, for me, easy to read through.
Yeah. And he did have some good, like, when I was reading through it, he did have a few of those really good kind of short, kind of layman's term explanations for those terms. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Oh, okay. A page later, he actually explains what it means. Okay, now I actually get it. That's great.
So I don't know. I thought it was fun.
It was a very interesting read, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about reads.
Oh,
So next pick is my pick, and I decided that because we've had two nonfiction picks and stuff that's kind of like very like kind of music heavy and jargon heavy, I wanted to pick something a little bit light and fluffy.
Light and fluffy.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. My pick is Rose Tremaine's Music and Silence.
Oh.
And I will read you the back of it. So, in the year 1629, a young English lutenist named Peter Clare arrives at the Danish court to join King Christian IV's royal orchestra. From the moment when he realizes that the musicians perform in a freezing cellar underneath the royal apartments, Peter Clare understands that he's come to a place where the opposing states of light and dark, good and evil, are waging war to the death. Designated the king's angel because of his good looks, he finds himself falling in love with a young woman who is the companion of the king's adulterous and estranged wife, Kirsten.
Oh my gosh.
With his loyalties fatally divided between duty and passion, how can Peter Clare find the path that will realize his hopes and save his soul? So, I figured that this could be a really fun read for next time. I don't know if it's really good, but it's period, it's music, and there's a lot of drama and hopefully sex involved. I'm hoping that there's sex involved.
Oh dear, I do have to put an Indigo book order soon, so that will be on it.
But look at this. It doesn't look incriminating at all.
No,
right?
It doesn't.
There's no like ripped bodice or anything.
No, it says it's mostly historical fiction.
Well, of course you
and
already
then
looked
at
it
the
up.
bottom, it's like romance.
And here's the thing, it won an award. So,
Oh
1999 Whitbread Novel Award. So it's good writing, guys.
It's
Like
a
hopefully,
literary award.
yeah, like hopefully, like it's a little bit longer than 400, but hopefully it'll be light and fluffy.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but that's my pick because I figured I was like, hey, let's have something a little bit lighter. And also I like reading period things just because I don't get a chance to read a lot of this stuff sometimes. And I was like, hey, you know what? We always pick books that are a little bit outside of our comfort zones all the time.
Mhm.
This could be a good one because I'm always in fantasy worlds. This is kind of fun.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's my pick, you guys.
Woo.
Ooh, excited.
Yeah. All right. So I think our next meet will be in May.
May. Okay.
May. Yeah. Yeah, because it's March right now. Yeah, we'll be in May. We'll figure out a date and I'll post it on the website and stuff. But I think our conversation for our book, How Music Got Free, is over for today. Thank you, Karen, for picking this. This was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And like what Amanda said, like I think every single time we come here and chat, it's always like we would have never picked this book unless for this book club. So we're getting a chance to expose each other to different types of stuff that we wouldn't normally read.
Exposing each other.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be like some exposure here, guys.
Oh my god.
I mean, his name is Peter Clare, you know?
So disappointed if there isn't any.
I know, I hope so. All right, you guys.
Work, guys. Not safe for work.
Not safe for work, NSFW. All right, you guys, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully you guys have a good day. It's really early. This is not normal for us.
Yeah, this is weird that we're not rushing off to bed right now.
That's true. All right, you guys, see you later. Bye.
Bye.